You didn't choose this script, but you've been living by it for years. I know I was, and I didn't realize it at first because my life looked like it was the result of my choices. But eventually, I started to notice something uncomfortable. A lot of my decisions weren't really decisions at all. They were defaults. They were habits of thought. They were rules I'd absorbed somewhere along the way and never thought to question. And once you see this, it's a little unsettling because you start to realize how much of your life is being shaped by programming that you didn't consciously choose. That's what I want to talk about today, the hidden script that is quietly running your life and how to begin breaking free from it. Because if you don't bring this stuff into awareness, your brain will just keep doing what it's always done. This is how people end up repeating the same patterns for years. In this video, I am going to walk you through 5 simple but powerful steps that help you start rewriting your own internal programming. So let's start at the beginning with learning how to recognize the script that you've been living by, often without even realizing it. This is step number 1. Before you try to fix anything, before you set a new goal, download a new routine, or tell yourself that this time will be different, I want you to pause and notice something more foundational. Not the behavior, not the habit, the pattern underneath it. Most of what we do each day isn't the result of conscious decision-making. It's the result of an internal system quietly doing what it's been trained to do. I call this your inner blueprint. It's the internal framework that your brain uses to interpret the world, to decide what feels possible, what feels risky, what feels familiar, and what feels like you. And most of the time, it's running completely in the background. You can hear your inner blueprint in the things that you say automatically, like, "This never works for me," or "I always fall off the wagon," or "Now isn't the right time," or "That sounds great in theory, but..." Notice that these aren't dramatic thoughts. They're practical, reasonable, and very convincing. Let me give you a really simple example of how this plays out. So let's say someone decides that they want to start exercising again. They sign up for a class, they go once or twice, then they miss a week because life gets busy. Now, 2 very different things can happen internally. One inner blueprint says, okay, that week was chaotic, I will go again next week. The other inner blueprint says, see, I knew this wouldn't last. I'm just not someone who sticks with things. Same behavior, same missed week, completely different interpretation. And that interpretation determines what happens next. That's because your inner blueprint isn't just your identity. It's a combination of beliefs, past experiences, stories you've absorbed, fears you've learned to avoid, and assumptions that you have stopped questioning. Your brain is wired for efficiency and predictability. It's constantly scanning for patterns so that it can conserve energy and keep you safe. So when you've repeated the same interpretation of yourself or the world for long enough, your brain treats it like a rule. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. And familiarity feels safer than possibility. I didn't notice this until I started paying attention to my own internal explanations. The stories that I told myself about why certain things felt hard. The rationalizations that I used without thinking. The little mental shortcuts that sounded harmless but kept leading me back to the same outcomes. And that's when it clicked for me. I wasn't failing. I was following instructions. And this is the shift that most people miss. Your inner blueprint isn't commentary. It's guidance. It shapes how you interpret setbacks, what you expect from yourself, how you respond when things get uncomfortable. And as long as that system stays invisible, you'll keep getting the same results, even while trying very hard to change them. So step number 1 is start noticing the pattern that's running you. For now, don't try to fix anything. Just start noticing your patterns, the explanations that you default to, the assumptions that you make about yourself, the stories that quietly justify why things stay the same. Awareness is the first crack into the blueprint. Everything else comes later. Because once you start seeing the pattern, the next question becomes, what is this blueprint actually made of? And that's where we're going next. So let's move on to step number 2. So here's the thing. Your inner blueprint isn't just one belief or one story. It's a system. Think of your inner blueprint like an internal rule book that your brain has been building your entire life. It's the lens that you look through. It's the filter that you interpret things through. It's the framework that your brain uses to decide what things mean. And that framework is made up of a few key ingredients. It includes your beliefs, what you think is true about yourself, other people, and how the world works. It includes the stories that you've been telling yourself for years. Not big dramatic stories, everyday ones, like, this always happens to me, or I'm better when things are calm. It includes your fears, not just fear of failure, but fear of discomfort, judgment, disappointment, or change. It includes your attitudes and your assumptions, what you expect things to feel like, how hard you assume something will be, and whether you believe effort will pay off. And yes, it includes identity, who you believe yourself to be, and just as importantly, who you believe you are not. All of that together is your inner blueprint. This is why I don't always love the word mindset just on its own. Mindset sounds like thoughts. Your inner blueprint includes thoughts, but also emotions, memories, conditioning, and nervous system responses. It's not just what you think, it's what feels true, what feels safe, what feels familiar. So here's a helpful way to picture it. If you were trying to build a suspension bridge, but you were working from a blueprint for a 3-bedroom bungalow, it wouldn't matter how motivated you were. You could work harder. You could follow the instructions perfectly. You could blame yourself when it didn't work. But the problem wouldn't be effort. The problem would be the blueprint. This is why two people can be given the same advice, the same information, the same encouragement, and have completely different outcomes. It's not that one person cares more or wants it more. They're operating from different inner blueprints. I saw this constantly in my years as a physician. I would say the same things to people. Same recommendations, same explanations, and the results could not have been more different. That's when I realized something important. What looks like non-compliance is usually just someone following their inner blueprint. You don't experience life directly. You experience it through your inner blueprint. So this is step number 2. Understand what your inner blueprint is actually made of. And within that blueprint, there is one layer that's especially powerful, and it's the one that most people ignore. But that's what we're going to tackle in step number 3. So now you can see the bigger system. Your inner blueprint is made up of beliefs and stories and fears and assumptions and attitudes, all quietly shaping how you interpret your life. But within that system, there's one layer that has outsized influence. The layer that determines what feels possible for you in the first place. And that layer is the who, your identity. And here's where things start to make sense. In health, in personal growth, in productivity, in wellness, we talk endlessly about what to do, why it matters, and how to do it better. And yet, we almost completely ignore the person who's supposed to do the doing, the who. When I was practicing as a family doctor, this was one of the most confusing parts of my job. I would explain exactly what somebody needed to do. I would explain why it mattered, sometimes very urgently, and I'd explain how to do it, and still nothing changed. In medicine, we have a word for this. We call it non-compliance, and I never liked that word because what I was seeing wasn't defiance or laziness or a lack of understanding. It was normal human behavior. What was actually happening was this. The change I was asking people to make didn't match who they believed themselves to be. And when there's a mismatch between behavior and identity, identity wins. This is how you end up with thoughts like, I should work out, but I'm not really an athletic person. I know I should rest more, but I'm the strong one. I want to speak up, but I've always been the easygoing one. These aren't excuses. They're identity statements. They're your inner blueprint saying, this change doesn't belong to us. You can't out-action a non-supportive self-concept. You can push for a while. You can white-knuckle it. You can force yourself through sheer effort, but eventually your behavior will drift back toward the person that you believe yourself to be. This is why so many capable, intelligent people feel like failures when habits don't stick. They assume something is wrong with their motivation or their discipline or their willpower. But the real issue isn't effort, it's alignment. The action you're attempting hasn't yet been approved by your internal sense of self. It's like trying to install new software on an operating system that hasn't been updated in years. Things might run for a bit, but eventually something crashes. So this is step number 3. Recognize the missing who. This is when you see, maybe for the first time, that identity isn't a side note in change. It's a central layer of your inner blueprint. And until you name it, every strategy will feel like it works and then mysteriously stop working. Once you see the who that's in play, the next question isn't, what should I do differently? It's, how do I actually update the system that's been running me? And that is what we're going to tackle in step number 4. So here's the good news. Your inner blueprint isn't fixed. It's not something that you're born with and then stuck with forever. Unlike your DNA, it's something that you have accumulated over time through experiences, interpretations, repetition, and reinforcement. And because it was built, it can also be updated. Rewiring your inner blueprint doesn't mean pretending to be someone that you're not. It doesn't mean forcing positive thoughts. And it definitely doesn't mean announcing a dramatic new identity and hoping that you live up to it. That almost never works. What it means is making small, intentional, internal shifts that slowly change what feels true, safe, and possible for you. Your inner blueprint updates in one main way, through evidence. Not motivation, not willpower, evidence. When you repeatedly show yourself, even in very small ways, that a new interpretation is possible, your brain starts to loosen its grip on the old one. This is the difference between saying, I'm terrible at consistency, and quietly gathering proof that you can follow through, even imperfectly. Or between thinking, I always fall off, and noticing, actually, I came back this time. Those moments matter far more than you think. One of the fastest ways that people reinforce an old inner blueprint is by interpreting setbacks as confirmation. A missed day becomes, see, this never works for me. But the same moment can be interpreted differently. I'm someone who resumes. That single interpretation changes everything. You don't need a new life. You need a new relationship with the story that you're telling yourself as you live it. So this is step number 4. Begin to rewrite your inner blueprint. Quietly, gradually, and on purpose. When your beliefs soften, when your stories become more flexible, when your sense of who you are expands just enough to allow something new, behavior starts to follow. Not because you're forcing it, but because it finally makes sense to your inner blueprint. This is why change can feel so hard, and also why it becomes surprisingly effortless once the internal shift happens. You were never broken. You were patterned, and patterns can change. Now, if this way of looking at change is resonating, if you're starting to see just how much of your life has been shaped by patterns that you didn't consciously choose, this is exactly what my book explores. It goes much deeper into the inner blueprint and how it shapes your habits, your health, and your sense of what's possible. It is scheduled to launch in June 2026, but if you're watching this before then, it is available for pre-order now, and I will link it below if you want to go deeper. So now that you understand what has been running the show, your inner blueprint, the beliefs, the stories, the identity, the assumptions shaping how you see yourself and what feels possible, the next question becomes, what are you feeding that blueprint every day? Because your brain becomes what it's exposed to. And if you're trying to reinvent yourself while your mind is living on a steady diet of stress, noise, and comparison, change is going to feel unnecessarily hard. So the video that I'm queuing up for you next is called How to Reinvent Yourself, Feed Your Mind the Future You Want. And in that video, I show you how to start shaping your mental inputs so that your brain stops working against you and starts supporting the version of you that you're becoming. I will link it on the next screen, and then I will see you there. So step number 1 is start noticing the pattern that's... Okay. Why am I having trouble with this? Okay. Start noticing the pattern that's running you. Is that it? Right. Okay. All right. Again.